I rise today on behalf of the California Legislative Jewish Caucus to present ACR 170, our annual resolution for Holocaust Remembrance Day. Known in Hebrew as Yom Hashoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day commemorates the approximately 6 million Jews and countless others who were brutally murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. Yom Hashoah also honors Jewish resistance during the Holocaust and is observed annually on the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. In observing Yom Hashoah, the Jewish Caucus has always been committed to centering the voices of survivors, the exceptional few who, through extraordinary resilience and incredible luck, survived the Nazis' attempt to exterminate the Jewish people. Unfortunately, due to age and the COVID-19 pandemic, our ability to hear directly from survivors has been greatly diminished. But we remain committed to telling their stories and honoring their legacy. So today, as part of debate on this resolution, members of the Jewish Caucus are honored to share the stories of Holocaust survivors and their descendants. These narratives are about people we know and love, family and friends whose incredible journeys serve as an inspiration and an enduring reminder of why our caucus does the work that we do. I'd like to begin today with the story of my friend Anita Friedman. I first got to know Anita because her son Adam and I studied together at Tel Aviv University, and later because of her incredible leadership in so many Jewish organizations. Anita's family was devastated in the Holocaust. Her sister Tova was 9 when she was murdered in the gas chambers in Treblinka. Her brother Menashe was only a year old when the Nazis threw him out of a second-story window and then used his body for target practice. Her uncle was put into a barrel of icy water in the middle of winter and frozen to death. 2 aunts were subject to horrific medical experiments, including forced sterilization. Her grandparents were murdered. So were countless other relatives. All told, Anita lost more than 200 family members in the Holocaust. Yet Anita's parents miraculously survived the war by joining the partisans, the Jewish resistance fighters who escaped into the forests. After the war, they made their way to the United States as stateless refugees. Anita was born 6 weeks later. She grew up in a community of 600 Holocaust survivor families. Like many immigrant families, people work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Anita didn't speak English until she was 6 years old. By that time, she knew all of the stories about what had happened to her family and to the Jews of Europe. She understood the cries and the screams that pierced the nighttime silence. There was no mystery as to why the adults had numbers tattooed on their arms. Incredibly, the survivors in her community were not filled with anger and hate and thoughts of revenge. On the contrary, they were filled with love, devoted with one another and to the community. They took care of each other, loaned money to those in need, and raised money to support the state of Israel. Above all else, they focused on their children. Everything was about the children. Anita learned important lessons from the survivors about what really matters in life. She learned the importance of community, of caring for the vulnerable, and about the need for Jewish power and Jewish self-determination. These lessons influenced her deeply. She became a social worker, an advocate for immigrants and refugees, and today serves as the executive director of Jewish Family and Children's Services, one of the most impactful social service agencies in our state. Like so many survivors and their children, Anita is also deeply committed to ensuring that we teach our next generation about the Holocaust and patterns of genocide. As she has reminded me, research shows that Holocaust and genocide education develops empathy, reduces discrimination and hate, and inspires moral courage and a sense of social responsibility. Earlier this year, with support from the state of California, Jewish Family and Children's Services launched the California Collaborative for Holocaust and Genocide Education to help teachers learn how to effectively teach about the Holocaust and other genocides. Members of the new statewide collaborative network include leaders from the Jewish, Armenian, Cambodian, Rwandan, Sudanese, Uyghur, and indigenous communities. Over the next 3 years, this collaborative will teach 700 teachers and ultimately impact 70,000 California students. But that's not enough. Together, we have a collective obligation to do more, to bring the lessons of the Holocaust to all corners of our state, to speak out clearly and unequivocally about current genocides, and to rededicate ourselves to combating anti-Semitism, racism, and bigotry of all forms. In that spirit, I respectfully request your support on ACR 170. I wanted to conclude with a few observations. First, as you have heard today, the Holocaust, for members of the Jewish caucus and for members of the Jewish community, it is not a mere historical incident. It is something that is deeply personal. And I think you have heard that from members of our caucus, whether it's our families, and I want to acknowledge our colleague, Assemblymember Bauer Kahan, who can't be with us today, whose grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, but you heard about Mr. Berman's family, you heard about Mr. Bloom's family, you heard about Assemblymember Friedman's experiences with all of this. For all of us, this is a deeply personal issue. And the Holocaust was millions of individual traumas, but it was also a collective trauma. It is a collective trauma that we as the Jewish community feel. And it has so powerfully influenced the way that we think about the world, the way that we react to issues, the way that we as a caucus navigate this legislature and the issues that we work on. And it so fundamentally motivates the work that we do, not only to stand up for ourselves and our community unflinchingly, but also the work and the mission that we feel to stand up for other vulnerable communities, to stand up against other instances of genocide in the world, to stand with other vulnerable communities, whether they are immigrants or are indigenous or other people who are facing persecution. And so with that spirit in mind, I think one of our colleagues said, the Holocaust is not just something we should reflect about, it is also a call to action. We hope that today for all of you will be a moment of somber reflection, but we also hope it will be a moment to think about our collective responsibility as people with a unique and special ability to change the future of our state and our world, to do something about anti-Semitism, to do something about racism, and to do something about bigotry of all forms. And with that, I would respectfully request your aye vote on ACR 170.